Good morning. Happy Monday. It's today we are welcome back. Today we are learning Perek days of Maseches Terumos. Today's shir is sponsored the Nishmas Aaron Nachum ben Simcha Akain. Again, Aaron Nachum ben Simcha Akain, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shepsel, Baruch Sarah Bashmo Aleib, and Yah Moshe ben Yosef. May the Neshamas have an Aliyah. Amen. Perek Bays, here we go. Yesterday we gave an intro into Truma, and now we're going to continue. When Truma is being designated, it must be touching or near the produce from which it was being designated. So yeah, it's a that have been in the pile. This law is called the law of proximity, which is min hamukaf. Um, uh, Right, because you want it's not necessary for them to touch, but they have to be nearby. Um, okay, so Mishnah Aleph starts off. Ein tarmin mitoher al hatame. We may not separate truma from toher produce for tame produce. The Chachamim were concerned that one who doesn't is toher produce from as truma for tummy produce will violate this law of proximity by keeping them apart. I fear that the tummy produce will make the toher produce tummy. The aim tarmud trumas and truma. But if the people did separate truma from toher produce for tummy produce, their truma is valid, although they should not have done that. The MS Amru, in truth, Chazal said, Ego shall devela shenitla mixoso. If part of a round cake of pressed figs became tameh and part of it remained toher, torim and hatoher sheyeshbo al tameh sheyeshbo. One may separate truma from the toher figs that are in it from the tameh figs that are in it. You can separate the truma from the toher for the tameh. And there's no concern that one will violate this law of proximity because the Torah and tummy figs are already touching each other. It's when they're not touching each other that's a problem. They're already touching them, and that's not a problem. V'chein aguda shel yarek v'chein arema. Similarly, if one has a bundle of vegetables or a pile of produce, of which some is tummy and some is toher, one is allowed to designate the tahor items as truma for the tummy ones because they are already touching each other. I mean, I don't understand how is it possible that they're both touching each other and one's. I mean, I guess it's different levels of tumma. Like tumma's, this whole criteria how to make things tummy. Um, I think it's wet stuff can make it tummy, and the dry stuff can't. I'm not sure. I don't look at the chart as to what. I have to find the chart for tomorrow about the different levels of tumma. Maybe I'll put it up on the screen tomorrow. Hayu shnei igulim shtei agudos shtei arumos. But if there were two round cakes of pressed figs, or two bundles of vegetables, or two piles of produce, achas tamei and achas tahora, and one of them is tamei and one of them is tahor. Lo yisram mizelze. One may not separate truma from this one for that one. Since these are distinct items, you might keep them apart, which would violate the law of proximity. If Lezer says, Tormim and Toher alatame, one may separate truma from produce that is toher for produce that is tameh in all cases. He did not, according to Lezer, the Chachamim did not prohibit a separation of this type out of concern that they would keep them apart. Mishnah Beis, Ein Torah Hatami ala Toher. One may not separate Truma from Tame produce for Toher produce. Before we talk about separate from Toher for Tame. Now we're asking the reverse question. You may not separate Truma from Tame produce for Toher produce, because instead of giving the Kohen Toher produce, which he may eat, One's giving him tummy produce which he cannot eat. So there's no benefit to that. Being Taram, and if he did separate Truma from tummy produce for Torah produce, Shogig Terumos Truma. If he did it by mistake, then his Truma is valid. He didn't know it was tummy. If he said, but if he did it intentionally, like he personally gave him tummy produce, then he has not done anything, and he has to separate Truma again. Likewise, if a Levi has Meiser that is Tevel, and it's Tameh, because he did not yet give Chumas Meiser from his Meiser. And he repeatedly separates Chumas Meiser from the Meiser Rishon that is Torah. So Shogig Nash Asa Asoy. So if he did it by mistake, he didn't know it was Tameh, then what he did is done, and the Chumas Meiser is kosher. Mazid but if he did it intentionally, like he purposely did this, then he didn't do anything, and he has to separate Chumas Meiser again. If Yehuda says, Im Haya Yadeya Bo Betchila Afa Pi Shehu Shogig Lo Asatu. If he at first knew that it was Tameh, and even if he later forgot that it was Tameh, so that when he separated the Truma from it, he sinned by mistake, he has not done anything, because he knew at one point that it was Tameh. Therefore, it's we have to redo it. Mishnah Gimel, Hamad Bil Kelim B'Shabbos. If someone took immersed tummy utensils in a mikveh on Shabbos in order to make them Torah, which is also do on Shabbos, Shogeg Yishtamish for him. So if he did that by mistake, he didn't know it was Shabbos, then he may use the utensils immediately. Mazid lo yishtamish. But if he intentionally knew that it was Shabbos and he violated Shabbos purposely, then he may not use them. It has to retowel them. He may not use them until after Shabbos. The tefillah is a good tefillah, but he cannot use them on Shabbos. He can only use them after Shabbos. Hamaiser from Shabbos. If someone took meiser or cooked food on Shabbos, which are both things that you cannot do, shogeg yochel meiser. Sorry, shogeg yochel meiser lo yochel. The law, so if he did it intentionally by mistake, if he did it unintentionally by mistake, he may eat the mice produce or the cooked food, but if he did it purposely, he may not eat it at all. Excuse me. Hanotea b'Shabbos, so someone planted a tree on Shabbos, shogeg, yikayim, mezid, yakor. If he planted it by mistake, not knowing that it was Shabbos, not knowing that there was usher to plant, then he may keep the tree as it is. But if he did it intentionally, he must pull it out of the ground. But if he planted a tree during Shemitah, which whether he did it mistakenly or purposely, he must uproot the tree, because the bottom line is that the Chachamim treated the Shemitah violators more strictly than Shabbos violations, because people were more likely to violate Shemitah, which is a much harder mitzvah to do, than violating Shabbos. Mishnah Daled. And Torah min al she'elamina. We may not separate truma from one type of produce for another type. Meaning you can't separate oil from wine, for wine, or wine oil. Oil, you have to do oil for oil and wine for wine. The im taram ain't truma. And if someone did do this, he separated one type from another type. His truma is not good. Kol min chitim echad. All types of wheat are considered one. Kol min te'enim ugrogerus devela echad. All types of fresh figs, dried figs, and pressed figs are all considered one. V'torim izelzeh. And you can therefore separate truma from one type of wheat for another type of wheat. Because it's all wheat, it's all figs, and it's all apples and oranges, but you cannot um, do oil for one, or one for oil, or wheat for figs, or figs for wheat. It doesn't work. Whenever a Kohen is available, to whom the Truma can be given right away, you should separate Truma from the best produce that he has. So if he has fresh figs and dried figs, he should designate only fresh figs for it as Truma, because they're better than the dried ones. But wherever the truma for a while before giving it away, you should separate truma from the produce that lasts longer, even if it's not the best produce. So if he has fresh figs and dried figs, he should designate the dried figs as truma because they will last longer than the fresh ones. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Leolam Hu Torim Min Hayafa. Rabbi Yehuda says that one should always separate truma from the best produce he has, even if no coin is available, and the other produce will last longer. Okay, moving right along. We're almost done. Two more to go. It's a short perek today. Mishnah Hey. Tormin Batzel Katan Shalem Below Chatzi Batzel Gadol. If Truma must be separated for a group of onions in a place where no coin is available, one should designate a whole small onion as Truma rather than half of a big onion. Something that's whole is better than something that's in a half. So the whole onion will last longer than half an onion, and therefore you should use that. Omer lo ki ela chatzi batzel gadol. The user says no, this is not so. Rather, you should designate half of a big onion as truma, since big onions are tastier. It's according to Yehuda. In the times of the Mishnah, it was common for people who lived in cities to eat one type of onion. People in the villages eat a different type of onion. Therefore, if you designate one type of onion as truma for the other type. Rabbi Yehuda would similarly say, Torah min betzalim b'nei Hamadina al ha-kofrim. One may designate onions of city dwellers as truma for onions of villagers. Avalomen ha-kofrim al b'nei Hamadina, but one may not designate the onions of villagers as truma for onions of city dwellers. Why? Because onions of city dwellers are the food of nobility, which shows that they taste better. Although the onions of the villagers last longer, he rules that the onions of city dwellers are considered the superior type because they are tastier. So even the Mishnah talk about politics. Politikin. It's very interesting. And finally, Mishnah Vav, V'tormin zeisi shemen al zeisi teves. One may separate oil olives. One the olives that have a high content of oil and are used for making oil as truma for picking olives, which are olives that contain very little oil, which are picked to preserve them for later consumption. If you look at the jars of olives you have in the store, ones that have all like those red pimentos and those other things, those are probably picking olives, and those are not the same olives that are used for making oil. Although zesi keves al zesi shemen, one may not separate pickling olives as truma for oil olives. One may designate uncooked wine as truma for cooked wine because uncooked wine tastes better than the cooked wine does. But one may not designate cooked wine as truma for uncooked wine. Any two items of produce that are kilayim with each other, meaning that the two items may not be planted together because of the prohibition of kilayim. Lo yisra mizeh al zeh, that one may not separate truma from one to the other, since they're classified as different types of produce regarding the kilayim. They are different regarding the laws of truma as well. That makes sense. This is prohibited even if one takes truma from the better type of produce for the worst one. And any two species of produce that are not kilayim with each other, meaning they may be planted together because they are the same type. One may separate truma from the better one for the worst one, but not from the worst one for the better one. However, if one did separate truma for the worst one, for the better one, then the truma is valid. Except in the case of darnel, which is an inferior type of wheat used as bird seed, which is invalid truma, because darnel is not a human food, and only human food can be designated as truma. And finally, the kishus and malafafon min echad. The regular cucumber and the curvy cucumber are one type of produce with regard to truma. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shnei Minin. Rabbi Yehuda says that they are two different types. And also the same Rabbi Yehuda, he argues with the Tana Kama at Kilayim as to whether regular cucumbers and curvy cucumbers may be planted together. So you see there's some consistency between Kilayim and Truma regarding those halachas. That is the end of Perek Beis. We will continue tomorrow with Perek Gimel. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.